And we managed to go live after your Alexa finished. So
Yes. Boo.
welcome everybody to this week's edition of DevBeardOps, where it's the beard on the inside that counts. Thank you, Doctor, for
Yes.
correcting me.
There we go.
We are going to continue our session with, and now I remember that I don't remember how to pronounce your name, so I'm going to go with Ian Mckay over here. And we're going to talk about infrastructure as code. But what we're going to do today is slightly different. Is we're going to first take a little bit of a stroll down history lane and talk about how we all got started with infrastructure as code. What were the tooling like available in when we started, because we started at different times. And then we're going to switch it over into, if we started today, how would we approach it and what would we do differently? Because I know personally I learned a lot of things along the way that I'm never going back to bash scripts, trust me, and things like that. But before we get into all of that fun, Ian, why don't you introduce yourself and pronounce your surname? Thank you.
Thanks. My name's Ian Mckay. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I work for a cloud consultancy called Kablamo here in Australia, but I'm also an AWS community hero and a partner network ambassador, which means I get to harass a lot of service teams and interact a lot with the community like I'm doing here. So hi, everyone.
Ian is a lot of things. Ian creates a lot of great pieces of software, tools, and a lot of things all of us use. So we should all thank Ian for your CloudFormers and your IAM Lives and whatnot. So thank you, Ian. Before we also continue, I want to ask the audience, is the audio good? Please make sure to tell us, because checking audio live on stream is not the same thing. So just let us know in the chat if you can hear us fine, if this is good, and yeah, we can kick it off. So Kobus,
Cool.
what is for today?
What is for today? Well, I want us to talk a little bit about how we got started on our first infrastructure as code project. And we can stretch that a little bit, the code part, because like I said before, my first wanderings were by using some bash scripts and things. But I'm very curious to hear from Ian, what's the first thing that you did with regards to what you would consider infrastructure as code automation?
That really depends on how much we stretch the as code bit. I know. If we change this to something like, what's the first time you automated infrastructure? I think that comes down to my use of vCenter Orchestrator. And that was a GUI tool for, I guess, privately deployed clouds. So if you had ESXi servers deployed in your server room or something like that, it would really help you to quickly spin up virtual machines on those boxes in the configuration that you specify. And then you can do that based on a number of different triggers, I guess. So one of the things that I originally started with was triggering the creation of Tomcat servers, which was used in my company at the time. And that triggering the creation of that through Jira tickets. So a Jira ticket would be raised, and I would say, yes, I approve that. I think that that person deserves that server. And then that would go away and spin up a server without me having to worry about it, which was a very time-consuming process at the time. So, and then I'd have a little...
That's a good question or a good point. Why did you do this? Because, you know, one thing is to say, I like scripting or I like automation. That's fine. But like, why did you do this? Why do all of us why do all of us approach things through code?
Yeah, and the short answer to that was I was lazy. I was so lazy. and laziness brings out the best in us.
Yes.
It absolutely does. So spinning up these servers was so time consuming. We had to run books so long in Confluence, and I was just losing my mind creating all these servers. So I scripted it up. It was PowerShell at the time to create all these servers because they were Windows servers. And doing that and having a little bot that just said, yes, it's done, or no, something broke, was far easier for me than to go in and make all these servers manually. So I think that was really my first foray into automation of infrastructure and how effective it could be for me solving my own job.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We try to not necessarily be more effective. Yes, of course, we want to be effective as we want to grow in our jobs, but a key point here is we want to try to get the more boring things out of our way, so we can focus on the fun things engineers just do. So hence somebody invented infrastructure as code, so we can just automate all of the boring clicks out there. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Kobus, what about you? What was your first foray into this?
Mine probably was, I'm trying to remember now when, basically just using bash scripts to call the AWS CLI to create all the infrastructure. And then what I quickly realized after a while is like I have a lot of if-else blocks in there. And it got to a point where I started destroying some things because remember it's imperative. You'd have to tell it exactly what you need to do, which meant that you first need to check, does the server exist or not? If it does, is anything else changed? It was these chunks. And I remember that was like absolutely horrendous. And then I started playing with, what was next? CloudFormation a bit. That got me a bit of distance, which is good. Then switched over to Ansible. Actually, Puppet was before Ansible, and then Ansible, and then ultimately settled on Terraform. I did play with Chef. Chef also has a module or some cookbooks that you can do for AWS infrastructure, but I just found that it wasn't that well maintained at that point or that widely used. So I went for something that's mainstream. But I mean, those bash scripts, like, it makes you feel super smart and like, hey, I've got job security. But when it takes you like 50 minutes just to make one change, and then you're not even sure if it's going to work, that was not a pleasant feeling, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I remember so I've played around with in the old days. I've launched same as Ian did, a virtual machine with PowerShell, and I would spin up it from a vCenter when somebody would request it. It was just because I didn't want to get a phone call saying, "Hey, I need that development server." But my first proper foray into infrastructure as code, and I use the term proper here very loosely, was I was doing this job of being it was called the server provisioning administrator. Basically, my job was to deploy servers. Now, they were physical most of the time. I didn't rack and stack them, but I would install the operating system on them. And what would happen is somebody would provide me with a list of IP addresses out there to just connect to them on the remote interfaces. And what happened is that I've basically created scripts to configure these things. Instead of me going manually to each one, I had to do it. And it was so complex because I was doing Windows, Linux, and Solaris. So I literally would have decision trees in my scripts depending on what is happening to do. And it was just a cluster truck of things there. So it wasn't
family friendly show. Well saved.
Yeah. It was not the best thing in the world out there. But then I saw CloudFormation and I was like, oh my god, why is this so good? Mind you, CloudFormation back then was not the best of things. So yeah, but that was my first one.
Yeah. So now for the fun part is let's start getting into the meat of what have we learned over the years from infrastructure as code. Because obviously there will be some things that you learn, and this will probably be a little bit of combination between learnings and horror stories. So let's get Ian to kick us off on what have you learned about how to do infrastructure properly as code over the years.
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind is that when I started this, I was thinking really broad scheme. I thought a template was where everything in your application lived. I wanted to put databases and VPCs and instances and all sorts of things in that one template and have everything deployed up straight up. And I realized very quickly that is not the case to do because that becomes monolithic. It becomes really fragile. You don't want that to really happen. So breaking your infrastructure into smaller self-contained templates and stacks was really key to getting started more properly, more regularly, and making those changes at that micro level so that it wouldn't affect the entire stack if you had a syntax or an indentation error that really threw your template out, because that was very, very common in the days, especially when we were developing in JSON and things like that.
And if you would have somebody starting right now, so you have a junior engineer, jump in and say, hey, I want to do infrastructure as code. What is the top 2 things you would tell them?
So, number one, I'd say CloudFormation really helps you with a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff that happens because of the managed service. You don't have to worry about things like state or managing those files. So that would be my recommendation as terms of choice. There's a number of tools that really help you get started now. And I keep mentioning this, but the CFN link plugin with Visual Studio Code is one of my favorite plugins. It is such a lifesaver. Helps you really shift left that process of validating your code and making sure that it is correct and you're not making any mistakes and those common errors that can occur.
Yeah.
So recommending that immediately is key.
I would agree. It helps you out to, especially with starting with CloudFormation, helps you weed out the problems quite early on. So yeah, and we would like to hear from the audience, folks watching us. Tell us, how was your first infrastructure as code experience? Tell us where you started. What was the first framework you used, and would you change it? Well, back then.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. And you, Kubus?
The biggest thing I learned over time was very close to what Ian is saying with that first template, which is don't put everything in a single stack or infrastructure set or whatever it is. Because I also went that route where it was from VPC all the way up. So the VPC load balances all of the services, because I went for because that point there was a lot of discussion between monolithic repos and multi-repos. So I decided, hey, I'm going to try my hand at this monolithic infrastructure repo thing. No. The reason is that everything is interconnected, which means if you make a mistake somewhere, what I did, for example, is on one case, I made a change to the VPC, which then meant that every downstream dependency from that, including database, etc., would have been nuked if I had applied that change. Now, luckily, I caught that before I even applied it. So I saw that whoa, was destroying too much over here. Got around it by ended up hacking the Terraform state file just to get to the state that I wanted to be. But basically, splitting into smaller chunks. And also, when you start doing that, I found that the second thing that you start realizing is you see patterns. Is that we've got 5 servers, 10 services, 15 services, and no matter what the language is, they tend to have these specific steps. There's a build step, a build compile step, or package step or something, some kind of artifact that comes out of it, some kind of config that sits somewhere, and then ultimately some kind of way to get it onto a server, whether it's a container or deployed directly, or even in one case, we had to pre-build an AMI with a Docker image pulled onto it, because doing it that way was faster to get the EC2 instance up with that image than spinning it up and then pulling the image from the Docker image from ECR or S3. We tried a couple. It was a huge thing. It was something with NumPy and SciPy, so it was like a 2 or 3 gig image, and it just was too slow. So definitely split it into smaller chunks and see if you can't build like frameworks and patterns on top of whatever it is you're using.
I agree. I think the fragmentation of your infrastructure, especially in logical modules, or modules, what you like to call them, chunks of things you do, is very important here, because it helps you. Well, as Kobe said, if you break something, at least the blast radius is lower, right? If you break a template, you don't destroy all of it at once. So, but also it's very important to kind of segment it properly, right? You just don't do it alphabetically. You do it, you separate things into like your static infrastructure, right? Your databases, your S3 buckets, all of the things that you need to have permanent somewhere. Then you move on to something logical like a backend and a front end and identity and logging and service accounts and whatnot. So this is where you approach it. This is that would be my advice in this case.
And I think it comes up a lot that when people talk about infrastructure as code, they talk about the ease in which things can break and the fragility of it. So I think one of the things I would really have liked at the beginning was a lot more help, which has now come since it was deployed, around safety. So things like change sets and things like deletion and update replacement policies. Things like change sets can say, I've made a change to my template, but this is what it's actually going to do to my resource. That database you deployed is going to be destroyed and recreated. Do you actually want that? So it's that extra check at the end to say, you know what? Hang on, let me just check that, make sure that that is correct and things like that. And same thing with a deletion policy or an update replacement policy, where you just say, if I personally make a change that attempts to change this or replace this, even if I say it's okay, I want you to make a second one. I don't want you to touch my original data. Worst possible case, and if I delete the resource out of the template, it's not going to actually go and delete the resource. It'll bring it outside of CloudFormation's usage, but it still stays there. It still stays running. My app doesn't have a huge outage. So those sort of safety measures are really important, I think.
I agree.
No,
I agree.
definitely. It's one of the reasons back in. I mean, this was once again years ago. It was Terraform 0.6 when I started. Is why I preferred Terraform over CloudFormation. Is it had that plan functionality where it says, well, boom, here's the output. This is what I want to go do. And especially when you saw those, red or yellow lines, especially the ones with the plus and minus, like destroy and recreate, you would take a pause. I actually built some scripting in that would, if it picked that up in the pipeline, and you didn't add specific tags and things, it would definitely say, no, it cannot proceed and fail the build. Because, drop the database once.
Yeah. We have a comment here from AWS Steph. CloudFormation was my first infrastructure as code, and it was rough. Okay, we kind of bashed a bit on CloudFormation last time. Please understand, we think CloudFormation is good. At least two of us think.
Awesome.
He likes Terraform. But yeah, the problem with CloudFormation when I started before, and I said this last time, is that it was JSON, and JSON. Now, you can fight me on this. JSON should never be written. JSON should be consumed and programmatically read, but you should never manually write JSON. Right. But that was the problem, right? If you wanted to comment something, if you wanted to remove quickly and put back, it was just a mess, and I understand that. So YAML is a good thing. It's much better than JSON, I would say, but it has its own problems. But I would say that CloudFormation has gone a long way since it being 50 kilobyte limit and purely JSON.
51.
51.
I think it was 51. Yeah, it was an odd number.
Yeah. Okay. And there was a limited number of resources you can do inside. So a whole lot of things. A whole lot of things there. Dan McGay says, yeah, I can feel your keyboard. Yeah. Print out YAML is a good thing.
Look. Please tell me you've seen that post with the person who was shortening the country codes and the issue they ran into.
No.
Okay, so very short story quickly. It was configurations stored in YAML, and there was a list of countries. So just your normal countries, dash country name, dash you know what the YAML syntax looked like there.
Yeah.
And then what the person thought is let me be smart about this. I'm going to take it down to the 2-letter ISO country codes, because guess what? There's an ISO standard for the country shortcut, or the shortened version.
I can see this coming. This is going to be a Norway problem.
Yes. Because what happened is the text no is interpreted as Boolean false, not the text no, and then it just broke. Yeah.
As I said, YAML has its bad things. I'm not saying YAML is the solve-all solution here, and but it's better. And people are gonna quote me now on this. I'm sorry. Is there a better? So let me know, chat. Let me know what is the best markup language out there for configurations. Is it YAML? Is it TOML? Is it? I'm not sure if there anyone other exists. XML. XML people say, I would say the same thing about XML as I say with JSON. XML should never be written. But let's not get into that right now. One great thing about JSON is that it has JQ, and JQ is just a wonderful piece of, I'm not sure why JQ isn't just a utility in the GNU package, available everywhere. LaTeX is like Markdown, right? So it's you write pretty text with it. I'm talking about configuration items in this case, but I guess you can use LaTeX for that as well. Okay, so we've figured out that YAML is better than JSON, I guess. But yeah. So then now, what would you fix, Ian? Now that you look back onto if you were in the same situation, of course. You wouldn't be because it's a different time, I guess. But if you were starting to provision virtual infrastructure, let's say virtual machines, and maybe there weren't platforms that back then, how would you approach it now? Would you do something differently about it? If you would have to do it in the same PowerShell way or whatever you did?
Oh, I think it does come down to safety. I think I was a bit naive when I was beginning in that area about what could possibly happen. So one of the things my very first infrastructure as code solution did was that when someone was done with the server, it would go and delete the server. So look it up by name and go and delete that server. Now, if for some reason that name didn't come through and that filter wasn't applied, you've just deleted the entire infrastructure in your environment. And it was something that I picked up eventually, and I discovered that this could happen. But it wasn't something I was considering back in the time. So I think a lot of those safety measures are really important, especially if you're rolling your own, because bad things can happen when you're given admin rights.
I would agree with that. I think it's very, very important to have some sort of a safety measure inside. Now, in the world of infrastructure as code frameworks, you don't have to kind of rely on your rolling your own most of the time. But even if you're using, like Kobe said, Terraform, right? So you have Terraform and you do Terraform plan, and that was this big JSON blob saying what's going to be changed. And then you can do some parsing and you see if there's something that's just changed that should not be changed, maybe. So it's important to do those things.
But the fun part with infrastructure as code is that you're very soon going to get to a versioning challenge. I ran into this at two places, actually, because what had happened is there were common patterns, like I said earlier, about how we were deploying the code. So off I went and, built this Terraform template that people could use. And what they did is they would copy it into their repo, add the config that they needed to for their specific one, and off they go, infrastructure up and running. Except then when I figured out that there's a better way of doing something, or we need additional functionality, like let's say specific logging configs or some of the routing info on the load balancer, then I went, okay, cool, update that poor template. Then I went like, okay, can each team please update?
Yeah.
Yes, there are 15 of you. Yes, it's going to take time, and no, you don't get any value out of this, but can you please do it? And that was fine for the first time, and somewhat for the second time. By the seventh and eighth time, people were really annoyed. So I basically just modified it at that point, added a makefile that said make upgrade that I could run in the CI pipeline if I needed to. Also, bad idea. Don't do that. Don't just grab the latest version. It was terrible. But at least I could get a way to automatically update the framework inside each of the projects. It was very dirty. It was literally a git clone, remove the framework files, re-add the framework files. And then, But you're going to run into that at some point as well.
And Dan MBA's here mentions, like, we kind of missed that. SAM makes you verify that you want to create an API gateway endpoint with no authentication. So that's a built-in thing into SAM CLI that will say, hey, you're creating something that's potentially problematic. Are you sure you want to do that? So I think those sanity checks in the tooling you use and build are crucial, right? I love it. I love a tool that has a dry run function, right? That has a no op or something like that will just basically not do it, or in this case, will just warn you about it. So I think these things are crucial and very, very much important. I actually, when I was doing what is called I was doing a CloudFormation pipeline, a pipeline to deploy CloudFormation templates. One of my build steps was, of course, CFN lint, but I also have CFN nag. And CFN nag would basically do the things like, hey, you have a IAM policy too permissive, or hey, your security group is open to the world, and it would basically error out on that or warn me on that. So I could basically make decisions during the deployments out there. So there are third-party tooling out there that can help you as well. And Yogesh ran into a problem now. Kobus, you can jinx them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to quickly just pop some code here on the screen if I can get. Let's see if I can get.
Is this a solution for Yogesh?
Yes, it is, because
Yogesh,
it's a long-term issue.
You're welcome.
Kobus has not yet indemnified this code. Interestingly enough.
So if Kobus posts code online, just run it. Don't just run it. That's a man who has never taken down production.
Cool. Right. Let me go. This should be it. Let me see if we can bring it up. Okay, cool. So what I'll do quickly let me just get this into a comment for people. I'll actually pop it in as the chat as well, which is this. And this will show you some, obviously, production scars that I had to deal with. So basically what Yogesh is talking about is that with Terraform, if I run it with a version, let's say in his case 0.13.6, and I create the state file, or at least I touch the state file by changing any of the infrastructure.
Yep.
Then if I run it with a different version of Terraform that is newer than that, so anything above that specific version, it actually stamps the state file with that version and then doesn't allow you to use an older version on it again. because some of the data structures might change, and the way it updates the state file is only rolling forward. It can't roll backward again. So I had to deal with this, which is why I'm showing you this little bit of makefile here that I linked in the comments, which is literally and you can see this is old because this is, I think, 0.11 or 0.12, if I remember correctly, where I do a hash check on the actual binary on the system when you execute it to specifically prevent this, because I ran into this so often where developers would, because they're not infrastructure focused, they just want to get things going, install Terraform, whatever the latest version is, start running things, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, hold on, you just broke it for the rest of the team because of the state file issue. So I actually built this into the make files that I used for the developers to use, so they didn't have to worry about this.
Very good. Yeah. So, but this would basically this would fail, right? If
yes,
you
fail.
Hard fail. Yeah. So Yogesh, introduce this make file into your workload. So you don't have people doing it, and that's an actual big problem. Like if you have people juggling different versions of things, and things update so often these days, make sure to do it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll open up this one. I actually even have this other one, which is where is it now? Here we go, tier version. Let's open up. Oh, let's make this bigger. Give me. Oh, wait. Now I have to do the right-click zoom because
he's going to break his windows now.
No. Okay, okay. So you can't really see this, but basically you can see here, top left is an important part. If you go look at my public just GIFs, whatever. I'm not going to go into the GIF fight, although GIF is wrong. You can see that it's a little script that I had for macOS to actually be able to flip between different Terraform versions because I did it so frequently. Yeah. Oh, I see two comments here. The one is fun. The one is if MD5 is true, RM-RF. Yes. No. We don't do that. And then what you can do actually, sorry, this is going to be a little bit of self-promotion, Yogesh, is that talk that I reference here. I need to quickly just go find, I think it's YouTube, actually, talks. I think you can just Google for me like this. Yeah, there we go. So if you grab that, let me stop this quickly. Oh, wait. Oh, no, there's an ad, sorry. I killed that.
We don't see it. We can't hear it.
I was about to say there's an ad here, and I'm like very, very confused. Okay, so
this stream is sponsored by a YouTube ad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cobus posted a YouTube video there, so make sure to check that out.
Yeah. So that's the one where I actually go through the talk where I explain about the whole, because it's focused on multi-account, using that make file, and should get you going, basically.
So
I was not thrown by the ad. I'm sorry. I'm just like panic moment of, oh crap, did I just spam people with an ad?
Wait, don't you have YouTube Premium, Cobus? What?
I do, but I'm also one of those complicated people that have 4 different Chrome profiles and also 10 different Google accounts type thing. So this is on a non-premium one.
Okay. Well, cool.
So you mentioned before about that challenge for versioning and how common patterns in code would be duplicated. You eventually get to the point where your CloudFormation templates have the same bit of code, but it's a bit of code everywhere. And every time you want to make a change, you have to make that change in a bunch of different places, and sometimes you lose control of that. And so some of the cool features that came out, initially for CloudFormation at least, are things like macros and recently modules. But if that's the really pure CloudFormation approach. Now, recently the CDK have come out, and that's really hardcore on patterns and patterns that can be changed across the entire code base. So if you were to come back to infrastructure as code today, would you approach CDK like you would CloudFormation? Would you go straight into CDK, for example, without that history of a primitive like CloudFormation or Terraform? Yeah, it's a good question.
I would actually probably go straight into CDK. Main reason is that because it's a programming language that I'm familiar with. It's, I mean, as a point, I haven't used Java in Jeepers probably 10 years. Yes, I'm showing my age. And when I spun it up on one of the streams we did last year with using Maven to pull in dependencies, like almost muscle memory kicking, and like, this feels familiar. I know how to deal with this. Where, for example, CDK with JavaScript, because I've never, well, I wouldn't call it developing in JavaScript because of no, but I've dabbled with it, but I'm not familiar with NPM by any means. So using NPM was a bit weird. So definitely from that perspective, it's familiar. I know how to do the tooling. I know how to do checks and those kind of things. So I would go CDK if I was honest.
So if you would ask young Darko, so Darko before this thing here,
Hairy Darko.
If you would ask 7 years ago Darko, would he take CloudFormation or CDK if it existed at the time? I would go for CloudFormation because I'm not a developer. And these languages are okay. I can kind of work with them. At least at that time, I could work with them to an extent, but they wouldn't bring me any benefit. And CloudFormation would be much more clear for me. It's YAML, right? It's something I understand. It's basically a configuration file. And from that perspective, as a non-developer, not understanding what objects are or how to make an instance of something or whatnot, CloudFormation would definitely be in my alley more, right? Now, if you would ask this Darko, would he, with the current knowledge, start off with CloudFormation or CDK? I would start off with CDK because I have much more intimate knowledge with some of the languages there that I can take full benefit of it. So because the benefit of CDK is that if you know the language, if you understand yourself around the ecosystem, it will save you a lot of time. So that's one of the things.
I might go against the grain for you.
Okay.
Both.
Ooh. You would go with JavaScript.
I would personally say even in previous Ian, naive Ian, I think I would still start with CloudFormation. And I think a lot of that comes down to understanding what is actually happening under the hood. So immutable infrastructure, declarative code, things like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that CDK compiles down to CloudFormation and still runs that after the fact anyway, it's really important to at least understand the basics behind CloudFormation and what it's doing. So you understand that when things go wrong, you can actually diagnose that yourself. It doesn't require some expert knowledge or the internals of CDK.
Yeah.
You can go into the CloudFormation stack and see for yourself what's actually going on.
Let me also add another benefit to your little hat when it comes to CloudFormation. The CloudFormation template I written 5 years ago still works today. There has been no changes.
No breaking changes.
No breaking changes in CloudFormation, I think, since ever. Unless you create a resource that doesn't exist anymore in an account that doesn't support it, there are no breaking changes in CloudFormation. So CloudFormation itself is very stable. You can go to the AWS samples of CloudFormation and take your WordPress on AWS thing and launch it. The only thing that may fail are the actual user data commands. The CloudFormation itself will execute perfectly. So that's a thing I really like about it. So yeah.
Yeah. Just quickly for those, I'm sure Darko will be okay with this if I shared old Darko. This is the Darko you would have asked about how to do it previously.
Yes. No.
Yes.
that was high school Darko. This high school Darko only knew some C and .NET, and that's it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what the infrastructure code was.
Yeah. So the question here from Leo2402, which is the best language for CDK. The answer there would be, what language do you code in? Wait, Darko's getting his prop. You have it printed but not laminated yet, Darko. Come on.
Wait, I'm laminating it.
Yeah, definitely I would recommend the language that you actually code in. If you don't have any of the languages that are currently supported, so TypeScript, JavaScript, Java, Python, C#, I believe F# is also supported. Yeah,
and Go.
And Go. Yeah. So if you don't code in any,
I
kicked the cable. Yeah. If you don't support or don't code in any of those languages, then my advice would be go with TypeScript. The reason is just because the whole JSII interface is built in JavaScript to do the translation between the different languages. It's probably going to be a slightly easier experience with that, and there are probably more examples of JavaScript out there. JavaScript and Python are kind of on par with the amount of examples. Yeah. But once again, it depends on what people's preferences are and what you're building in.
My advice here would be, again, as Kobe said, depending on which language you know, but if you don't know any of the languages and you want to get into CDK, TypeScript or JavaScript, because that's how I started. the most examples out there are written in TypeScript and JavaScript, even though they're
that was good enough for Darko.
yeah, exactly for me. And to be honest, like it's you will find most things to get you started, and then you can literally switch a language. Like I did that. I started with TypeScript, and then just I do Python because I understand how to read the documentation properly, and it's basically the same thing. I think there are mostly, I don't have a thing here, mostly no differences between the languages because again, JSII helps you. JSI is this translation layer in between. Yeah.
I think there's one other thing I would throw out there. If you are completely new in your software development career and you don't know which direction you want to go yet, then I'd say one of two routes. If you are interested in building websites and apps and things, likely go the JavaScript, TypeScript route because that's generally the languages you'll encounter over there, which means CDK will feel natural in those languages. If, however, you're going into the machine learning world, Python is used extremely widely there. So if you want to focus more on a lot of the machine learning stuff, I'd say, listen, focus on Python more than JavaScript, for example.
So do you think we're going to have machine learning infrastructure as code at one day?
I've already done a talk of it in 2019. What do you mean? I'm serious.
You're what? What's what you're serious about?
I did a talk for AWS Innovate in 2019 on automating your machine learning infrastructure. And I showed three different ways.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying having machine learning to deploy your infrastructure, right?
Sure.
See?
What can go wrong?
Hey, what can go wrong? You just give it your workload code and like host this for me, and it does it, right?
So here's the problem with that. Machine learning works by providing it with training data.
Yeah.
And now, if you were very honest with me, which developers would you be happy with to provide this machine learning model with training data with good behavior?
Exactly. So yeah.
I bet you the machine would just go SSH production and the first command would be sudo su dash.
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple of comments here. Just to this is Live Bytes. He mentioned here, he or she. I think it also depends on what your background is, like Darko said, but it's also about knowing the basics of CloudFormation. And I would even go further, saying you should know AWS first before you go even to CloudFormation. Absolutely, right? So you need to understand the basics of AWS before. Yes, especially in CloudFormation. Not on SAM, or like SAM is an abstract. You just say function and it does a bunch of things for you.
Yeah.
On CloudFormation, you need to know what an exact thing is because you have to do manually. So, yeah.
But although I'd say if you are that new to AWS, use the CDK as well and go look at the CDK. What was it called? The constructs or the patterns? Or
patterns, yeah.
What patterns? Patterns, yeah. Because what that does, it's like with a very few lines of code, it actually spins up best practice stuff. So what you do is use CDK, provision the infrastructure, like I think it's like 6 lines to get a ECS Fargate cluster up and running, which consists of, I think, 400 something or 2,000 lines of CloudFormation. That spins up the VPC, the application load balancers, the service, the ECS cluster, the services in it, task definitions, etc. And then go look at what was created. Because remember, CDK uses CloudFormation under the hood. CloudFormation is in the console, and you can see the resources that are created. So then you can go click on what are the resources that it created, click through on those and go look at what the configs on them are, because that's one of the best ways to learn, is to see exactly what was needed.
Yeah. Excellent point.
I think it's important to note that the CDK doesn't lock you into CDK moving in the future as well. Because it is synthesized down to CloudFormation, you can take that stack and you can use it elsewhere. It still works with the entire CloudFormation ecosystem. So it's not a one-way door.
Yeah, I've worked with customers who use CDK exclusively to synthesize CloudFormation code, and then they just deploy it manually as CloudFormation. So, which is fine. Again, the good thing about CDK is that it didn't reinvent the wheel. CDK doesn't make API calls for you besides the call to CloudFormation. Everything is literally done by CloudFormation. CDK just makes it easier for you to create complex CloudFormation templates. So it's like Troposphere, right? Troposphere did the same thing. Have you worked with Troposphere, Ian?
Yep. Troposphere really takes the idea of infrastructure as code and puts it into code, right? So it is really specific on Python and really specific to what CDK would call the low-level constructs. It maps pretty much one-to-one to the CloudFormation resources that exist. So, as opposed to CDK, where you can have those high-level constructs which make like you said, an ECS cluster out of 6 lines of code. So
Yeah. Good point. ZB_C says, "Hi, I tuned a bit late, so we'll watch later.
Oh, yes.
Watch the VOD later. I tried out Former 2, worked really well. So there you go, Ian. You have
great.
another
Happy to work for
successful
you.
customer. Yeah. By the way, Ian is the creator of Former 2. If you have not seen Former 2, go to former2.net.com. Former2.com and check it out. It's a lovely tool that can help you create CloudFormation templates, among other things, CDK templates, SDK calls, Troposphere, Terraform, out of existing infrastructure. So basically select a bunch of things you have in your account, click, and boom, it generates a CloudFormation template or a template of any sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just quickly, I don't think we've actually asked the audience let us know what you're actually using for infrastructure as code and who you are using it. Because it's always fun to figure out what other people are using, what they're playing with, what's working, and how far are you with it with regards to the implementation. Is it just locally on desktops or laptops, or are you in your CI/CD pipeline, or is everything terraformed, or, sorry, bias there, I'm sorry. Infrastructure as code.
Infrastructure as code. Yes, do let us know. Before you let us know, let me also share my content. I've written a blog post.
Here we go.
I've written a blog post on infrastructure as code. So if you are new to infrastructure as code and would like to understand why should you use it and why is it important, check out part 1. I'm just going to post it here. So make sure to check it out. Part 2 coming soon. So yeah.
And hilariously, you mentioned Former 2. That is one of those tools that I would have liked, like me would like at the beginning of my infrastructure as code usage, because and in the beginning we all use the console, we all create those resources, and then we tear it down and try and figure out how that works again. Having something like Former 2 in the past would have been so good for me just to understand what is going on and what are these weird parameters I've never seen before and those sort of things. So. Full circle.
And it's easy for us to say like, oh, you should just go ahead and type your infrastructure. If you're a beginner, if you're starting out, it can be daunting. I remember my early days with Linux. I didn't know the command line. For me, Linux was something super complicated because there was no GUI. Cobus, do you remember? This is from your time. Webmin. Do you know what webmin is?
Yes, that's for basically having a web-based shell for your machine.
Well, it's not just a shell. It's a basically administration
cPanel
interface.
rules.
Like something like cPanel, but like for administering a Linux server. So I had like 2 Linux servers I need to administer. I couldn't use the shell at all, like the command line. So I had this web interface to like set up cron jobs and whatnot. And for me, I was really against the command line because it was so difficult. It was horrible. Why would people struggle with this? But once you get used to it, that's the best thing ever, right? The same thing with infrastructure code. You may think that clicking thing is easier, and it is. But once you get into yourself into infrastructure code and writing things, you will never look back at it because it saves you so much time. So yeah.
There's one other scenario where there's one other scenario where it is super, super useful. It's 2 days before Christmas and you would like to be on leave. And you can't because no one else knows how to fix things.
Okay, there you go. Good point. Yeah.
Yep.
That's also a job to the machines.
Yeah. I've actually had that where I was literally deploying things on Christmas Day. So,
Christmas Day, Jesus, man.
As opposed to the other happy scenario where it was automated, which was deploying the latest, because I did game development like after I was helping someone out at one point, automating it. And we did releases on Friday. So I set up a build box on AWS and sitting in the pub, opening up a laptop. Okay, cool. Everybody's code is in, hit the button. It's literally just like Jenkins job start, close the laptop, we're done. It'll be out in like 20, 30 minutes, depending on how long the build takes this time. So...
I think as Ian said in the beginning, we do all of these things because we're lazy. And that's good.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if this is a misquote, but apparently Bill Gates said something a long time ago that he will only hire lazy people because they figure out how to do things better with less effort. So yeah, exactly. So
I like the idea of I heard this very early on in my career and it really stuck with me. It's your job as an operational person is to automate yourself out of the job.
Yeah.
That stuck with me. That's one of those things that's like, it is counterintuitive at the time because job security and things like that. But But the idea behind it is that you're never going to get there. Like, you're just never going to get there. So if you have that target in mind, it really helps you focus on the right things.
And to be honest, the people who are highly, and I've worked with people who are just like, I don't want to automate my job away. I will keep clicking this until my mouse goes dry, right? And just completely protecting what they do. Like, don't look at my screen while I'm doing it. I don't want you to know it. I actually worked with a guy who prevented me from looking at his screen when he was doing something, so I wouldn't learn and steal his job. Those people don't get anywhere. If you automate things, you get extra time to do more things, to more fun things, and keep on automating even those things. So you keep on improving as you go.
And also, trust me, your manager and boss will be super happy the more you automate things. Like, the less they have to worry about is like, there's no way that if you've done like that much work for them that they're going to go, well, thank you, Darko, we no longer need you, cheers.
Yeah, thank you for your automations.
They're going to give you bigger problems. It's like that's how it works.
Exactly. So, I actually still have a piece of automation that I've written 10 years ago. Still runs on a company. I remember a friend of mine who still works there. He just sent me like, hey, this thing of yours still works. Okay, and it was written in PowerShell before I knew how PowerShell works. So
I had a fun one, which is also scary, whereas I'd work at a company and I'd implemented Chef for them. And then what had happened is, like, I was fairly careful to make sure that nothing was running on my user, because obviously I was the first user on most of the systems. But when I left, I had just removed my SSH key from the Chef config, so you couldn't use my user to get into the servers anymore. But then they contacted me, I think 2 years afterwards, saying, listen, they finally were happy enough that they removed my user from the system, and then one of the instances failed to run the Chef cookbook because there was still a terminal session live with my user that I'd forgotten, a screen session that I left open 2 years later. So that box hadn't rebooted in 2 years.
Wow. So I think we're all grateful for immutable infrastructure, that you don't have things lingering, or you mostly don't have things lingering out there for a long, long time. So we had a couple of folks here mention that they had like using CloudFormation. We have who is this? We have Yogesh saying that he uses Terraform. We have Eric mentioning using CloudFormation, and that he briefly looked at CDK and is looking forward to using CDK. So yeah, it's a great way to kind of move on to it. Don't feel yourself locked in again. CDK doesn't lock you in. CDK is just a layer of abstraction that helps you try different things. So yeah. And Yogesh, there's a question. If there's a blog or website to learn on DevOps automation, any suggestions? Oh boy.
It's a very broad topic.
So
wait, he's going to bring it up. He's going to bring it up. Oh no, it depends again.
Yogesh. DevOps automation is a term is very broad, right?
Also loaded.
Very loaded. So when somebody comes to you and offers you a job, you're going to have a DevOps automation role. A lot of things, right? So it's really important to understand what you're trying to do, right? If you're going to talk about testing, about pipelines, about infrastructure as code. So, and we can show you like a lot of links to workshops, workshops on CloudFormation, on Terraform, and whatnot. Those things. Where do you start? Again, it depends. Where? Go.
There are three things. So this is one thing I learned, especially when I started consulting, that every single company needs. They have software.
Yeah.
It needs some kind of build process at the very least to do something to the code once somebody commits it. That also then leads to the deployment process to be able to get the code onto said server or wherever it needs to go. And then the third piece was there's some kind of config and secret management. And if you just start with those three, figuring out how to do those in different ways and whatever's best suited to the company and the infrastructure you're dealing with, you'll almost immediately add value, because I can guarantee you most companies that I've dealt with at least have not had everything properly streamlined yet. It's like usually the first thing, now granted, I was a consultant sorting that out, so the type of companies that approached me didn't have that, so my data is a little bit skewed. But basically, if you can solve that and make it easier for the developers to just get their code out there without having to worry, that is almost immediately one of the first things you put in place.
Yep, absolutely.
I think putting on my consultant hat as well, it's about going into what is your customers, and your customers is probably actually the employees that you work with, right? You are serving them.
Yeah.
So it's about going up to those people and saying, what is the problems? What are the things you're having trouble with? And trying to solve those big ticket items from the get-go and trying to just make life easier for them. Like your job as a DevOps person is to automate the boring stuff, is to try and solve those problems to make that development process as seamless as possible. And yes, that'll lead to things like build agents. That'll lead to things like automation. So, and then from those concepts, you can find the various learnings and workshops and things like that.
Yeah. The question that's very difficult to answer is what is DevOps, right? And you can kind of answer it in a couple of ways, but it also very much depends on where you work and how you work it, right? There's no single book called DevOps Automation. I think so.
No. Definitely
I was actually also looking.
There is a book like that.
Darko, you might have it. There's the DevOps Handbook, but you might also have the Phoenix Project close by. I just checked my bookshelf. It's not in this room at the moment. That's definitely... Darko's going unplugged. We're about to enter the acoustic session of today's show. Just kidding. I have to be very careful with my humor. I've had scenarios where people just left. Darko's grabbing the Phoenix Project and the DevOps Handbook, and some other books, it seems.
Books.
You will share it with us, Darko.
So the first book about DevOps, if you're new to DevOps, it's the Phoenix Project. It's a novel. Yeah. It's a book. It's literally a story about how a company or a group of people adopted DevOps. Amazing. Read it twice. Listened to it once. Excellent. A book that comes with it that should come with it is the DevOps Handbook. Now, this explains DevOps in a technical sense. This goes into details about, tracking dependencies, changes, automating things, all of those stuff. So it's a very abstract. It doesn't focus on any specific technology per se, right? So because DevOps is abstract per se. But if you want something more practical, there is Practical DevOps. I know I didn't really want to make a pun, but it does actually something more. It does like your code testing and unit testing and automation. So these three books are great. So Phoenix Project, along with the DevOps Handbook and Practical DevOps by Joachim Verona. So this will be my advice.
And also just quickly the comment around audiobooks being for lazy people. It's also being for time optimized people. For example, I've actually trained my ear to be able to do audiobooks at 2.7 speed now. So you can get through content a lot quicker. Yeah, it confuses the crap out of you.
Yeah.
But I mean, as you've picked up, I tend to speak very quickly. So
here's the thing about audiobooks. Before the Corona times, I used to travel a lot, and we used to be in public transport, planes, trains, whatnot. And I used to read audiobooks like at least one a week. That was just the thing.
Read an audiobook.
Sorry, listen to an audiobook once a week. And that was the thing. Now, because I'm at home, I can't listen to audiobooks. I cannot just sit in my home on a couch and listen. I will either fall asleep or just start doing something else. So I've actually reverted to physical books because it makes more sense when I'm not moving. So, but yeah, it is definitely a way to speed up your book reading by listening to them. And as Ian says, Amazon people talking about books. I'm sorry.
Just one last thing here. I want to pass out to Yogesh around the question of how to get started. I do have a couple of videos on how to get started with Terraform. It basically just covers the basics. I'm still hoping to make more time to actually make more of them, but I'm dropping the playlist here in the chat for you if you want to look at those. It should get you from not having anything to actually being able to get a couple of resources up and understanding modules.
Yep. Let's go ahead and answer a couple of questions before we slowly wrap up. There's been a question here from Ehakan99. Never touched infrastructure as code before. Know the concepts but never used it in production. Is it sensible to jump right into CDK before using CloudFormation? We kind of discussed this initially. Depends on, are you familiar with some languages? Are you very knowledgeable on a specific language? Then if you are like a good person in Python or Java or JavaScript, CDK might be more useful to you. But if not, CloudFormation may be of more... Apologies. I was trying not to cough.
Sure, Darko, sounds like trying to sneak something in there.
Yeah, CloudFormation might be easier for you if you're a non-developer because it's just a configuration file.
It's not a bad idea. So it's definitely a viable approach. To start with CDK straight up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say every time I've heard of someone using CDK, they say, I'm not looking back. I'm not even trying to touch CloudFormation anymore because they're just so in love with how it works and how easy it is for them.
Yeah, exactly. So try it out. It's again, if that doesn't work for you, you can always come back to CloudFormation. So it's not that you will waste time. So once you get into it, it's a fun thing. Like I'm a fan of CDK and CloudFormation, so I like developing infrastructure in both. Sometimes I like doing CloudFormation, but most of the times right now I do CDK because it's just faster.
But I mean, it's the advice we always give on the show is like, if you're getting into infrastructure as code for the first time, at least try 2 different tools or 2 different ways of doing it, because that'll give you a feel for which one is more natural to you.
Exactly. Oh,
yeah.
Let me show another book. Wow, I have another book here. So
affiliate links in the comments.
Exactly. Subscribe to our Patreon. This is the book I show all the time, but it's if you want to learn about infrastructure automation, so your infrastructure as code on AWS, namely CloudFormation and Terraform. A book by Bradley Campbell is called The Definitive Guide to AWS Infrastructure Automation. It's great. It's like 60% code. So if you want to see how to build things on AWS using infrastructure as code, this is the book. And I've mentioned Bradley Campbell so many times. I think he has the hiccups now. So every time I mention his name.
Quick, before we start closing off, a question here from Ian Rodriguez around using different infrastructure as code tools across different projects in the same, I'm assuming, environment. Nothing wrong with that, except just make sure that you do lookups for whatever resources you're referencing. So, for example, reference the VPC name and go find the ID. Don't hard code the ID because then it makes it hard to port it between different environments. But there's nothing wrong. I mean, literally the best way you get people to adopt a tool is to make it easy for them. And if they are dead set on we want to use SAM because we know it, let them use it. Find safe ways for them to use it.
Yeah. As long as it can make them productive.
Yeah.
I worked with a customer out in Finland, and they basically use CDK because different teams know different languages, so they basically mix and match both Python and JavaScript and whatnot, just because they have different abilities. But at the same time, they all use the same tool to an extent. So if a team you work with finds it better to do things in SAM, as long as Kobe says nothing is hard-coded, you can go.
Yeah. If you're mixing and matching, like you should really try and keep the 2 languages apart in 2 application components. Yeah. If you do need to mix and match, so if you need to reference something that has happened in Terraform in CloudFormation, a really good way of doing that is to use SSM parameters, the SSM parameter store, because both languages natively support the lookup for it. And as of today, CloudFormation allows you to specify the latest version of an SSM parameter as an value. So that's something that's been requested for a while, but as of today, it actually works in CloudFormation. So you can say, I want the latest version of this parameter to be my value, and that works.
There you go. So Systems Manager Parameter Store is one of the ultimate glues at AWS that connects different services together. Yeah, it's the Lambda of its age. So but cool. Before we close off, Ian, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to host you here for the last 2 weeks. It's just so great to have somebody who's outside of this duo here. We get to talk about something we're really passionate about, like infrastructure as code, and with your endless expertise on that and the amazing tools and utilities and services and whatnot you've written is just wow. So thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge and experience.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in to listen up. I hope you learned some stuff. I hope it's been very valuable for you. And if you want to reach out, hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on GitHub, try use my tools. Let me know what you think. And if you want to chat more about infrastructure as code, my DMs are open.
Yeah. So reach out to Ian on Twitter. That's his little handle under his head. Yes. So make sure to reach out to him directly if you have any questions, and also reach out to us. We're both available on Twitter and LinkedIn and Friendster, MySpace. Yeah. So, but yeah, cool. So Yogesh, there's a couple of more questions before we wrap up. Mankus says NCDK. I would say yes if that's regarding should you use CDK with different frameworks. I don't know, but yes, and CDK. And yeah, Yogesh would like to have a 15 to 20 minutes demo on DevOps stuff. What DevOps stuff? I'm sorry. Yeah. It's so like the term DevOps for me is almost in the same line as computer stuff. So be careful. Try to be more focused on it. But Yogesh, join us next time.
Yeah, what we'll do next time, sorry, is just we've got a fairly hard stop, so I just want to quickly slot these two in. We'll try and get some videos ready to share next time, which is next week at the same time for you. And also, Ian, definitely come chat to us about the scenario that you have with the different things, because I think that could be a very interesting discussion. So let's take that up in next week's session. And now we need to run because we're already 50 seconds over.
Yeah.
But,
so Mankus, about SSM, it's not yet available in CDK. It should be coming up soon. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Thank you all. Thank you, Ian. And have a nice day. Bye.
Cool. Bye.